All right, let's talk about elk ecology and their behavior, as well as some of their adaptations to human interaction these days. This is going off of the same notes as my Where Are All the Elk in Colorado video, but I recorded that a few years ago, and I'm definitely older now. And so I thought that I would record it with whatever new information or new insights I could put into it that might be helpful, particularly for this course. This one is definitely centered on where are all the elk in Colorado, but this has a lot to do with animal behavior. Like I said, animal behavior in response to human activity. Yeah. And kind of things in that field, if you will. So let's get going. Where are all the elk in Colorado? Seems simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. To put it really simply, the elk are where you are not. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic or banal with that. What I mean is the elk are where people are not patternably existing, inhabiting, using, sometimes even ever touching. The elk are where people do not go. And there are going to be all different kinds of reasons people don't go there. I think Mr. Newberg said it best, something like distance and topography. Those are two humongous factors about where you will find elk and other animals that are really not tolerant of repeated human interaction, either because they get harassed or shot at, or it's just kind of their personality, if you will. Maybe something like a black bear that's not habituated, or a mountain lion. This is generalities for all elk, or this is generalities that do not apply to all elk, not all animals. As we say in the ecology and animal studies classes, ethology, the animals don't read the textbooks. And so we put together these textbooks that have all this great statistical information about preferred food, about ranges. Everything's like put into empirical, quantifiable, statistical data. And unfortunately, we don't get a chance to present that to the elk. And so they don't know what they're supposed to do. And I say that jokingly, obviously, to say that this is really just a general place to kind of understand how these things exist inside their worlds. Just like us, there's going to be outliers, there's going to be adaptations for the specific areas that they inhabit, but due to just their biology, there are going to be things that they are driven to find, just the basic necessities of life, if you will, those being someplace to safely rest, so bedding areas, someplace to eat, someplace to drink water, someplace to mate, and someplace to exist that makes sense for their thermoregulation needs. So that would explain things like migration cycles. So how they find those things can be varied. Those needs exist. Those are the underlying needs that exist under all of it, just them. And so how they find them might be different. You know, just for instance, an outlier might be an animal like a mule deer that normally makes a migration, might not, just because, not that all mule deer do, but a mule deer that makes a migration might not in a year, just because it finds some kind of a microclimate or an area where it's able to find all of its resources as well as stay thermoregulated. And that's a huge behavior change for an animal that may migrate hundreds of miles to not at all. You know, maybe the mule deers become habituated in that time to a nearby city that has all kinds of really nice lawns or alfalfa, nearby farmland. And so there may not the animal may not need to leave in the winter to find the food. It may be able to thermoregulate, but it may find all its food resources in one spot because there's so much bounty left over from the summer and fall. And so the animals don't read the textbooks. There's going to be outliers. But let's just talk about the basic pattern of elk in the day when we're hunting them with a bow. So this is a similar pattern, kind of starting in late August and into early October. Again, they don't read the books. In some areas, for whatever instances or reasons, they'll be starting sooner or later. And again, these things won't be linear in their progression, but that'll give you some kind of an idea of how they exist in their space and in their world. So. Don't worry, I drink water too. So in early September, about like when our archery season starts here in Colorado, most big bulls will be about or above timberline. At this point of the year, they're in bachelor groups. The females aren't really tolerating their presence. The males haven't been chasing them up until then because they're not in estrus and emitting hormones that they can smell. Oh, that was too funny. Our neighbor did a squeaky toy that kind of sounded like the push call for cows. So the big bulls are up above timberline in September. At that point, it's late. It's kind of getting into fall in the middle of the lower country, but it's almost like midsummer up there, because up in the high country above timberline, summer arrives much later and leaves much earlier and is a much briefer season, just due to the altitude, just keeping it cooler up there. There's so much exposure, it's much cooler, and the sun is just so much more intense up there. So many reasons. It's just a shorter season up there for plants. But when it is blooming above timberline, it can be full of amazing food. It's full of forbs and grasses, forbs being like leafy flowers and greens, kind of just think of like leafy plants, if you will. Those are very high nutrition sources for what an elk is able to process. And so the bulls are up there enjoying that amazing food source. The reason they're up there and the cows are not up there is because, well, sometimes, again, you'll see cows, but the reason that you'll see the bulls congregating up there is because of the aforementioned lack of tolerance by the female and youth groups, and because it is more intense up in the high country. It's exposed. There's not as much cover from anything, from predators, but the bulls are able to handle that pressure up there just because of their biology. They're bigger, they're badder, they've got the attitude, and by that point the medium, or they're towards the end of the growing season of their headgear, so they're able to kind of make that trade-off of this really steep, intense. The other thing is the intensity of the country, right? Sometimes it can be really steep and perilous, and just like young male humans, the young bulls are not as risk averse as others, and so that just kind of happens where they all happen together, you know. It's kind of like it's the bar, if you will, and so that's where the bulls are. And towards the mid to end of September, the cows are, so during this time, and the cows have been, generally speaking, a few thousand feet below where the bulls are. They're in very, as mellow as they can find, meadows and parks and really high quality feeding areas that also offer all the safety that they need for that time in their children's lives. And so they may have to travel a little further they may not have as high quality of food source, but again, the trade-off there is a lot of safety through the terrain not being as rugged, and just generally speaking, being in much more covered, wooded areas where they can't be seen, or areas that have great escape routes. So the bulls start to come down to meet them in mid to late September, and just like in humans, the young males are a little eager, so they usually come down first. And then the big bulls start to come down, and they're coming down in response to the cows coming into estrus. And they know that there's just these areas where they, kind of dance floors, if you will, where they often meet to do this dance, where they come into estrus and the bulls come to sort their hierarchical order amongst themselves through their rutting behavior. And so the impetus for the cow's menstruation, that was always interesting to me, is the amount of light that enters the photoreceptors of the cow's eyes or brain. And so the cows start ovulating in response to a very specific amount of daylight entering their eyes. This is also how some plants know how to switch from a vegetative state to a flowering state. You might wonder, how do plants out here know, okay, now it's time to switch to making a tomato or whatever? You know, some of them are definitely based on somewhat of a day cycle, like after 60, 90 days, it will switch from creating leaves to producing its fruit. But many plants switch on a photoreceptor cycle, or they respond to the amount of light in a day, if you will. And so do elk. And so they start their estrus period in response to the amount of light in a day. And so it's pretty guaranteed that cows will be going through the heat and starting the cycle of the rut at the same time every year. But it's possible that the behavior around it will vary greatly every year. In order for the calves that are birthed in the spring to survive, they're on a very tight schedule between the spring green up. That means when the snow from the previous winter is melting in the spring and revealing the ground under it, that can then produce grasses and forbs. There's a very tight schedule between that and when it starts to freeze, for those cows to have a warm and safe enough, like weather-wise, period, to give birth to their calves and then get them as fat as they can before the coming winter to survive, because it is a game of calories for them. So again, there will be some early births, there will be some late births for sure. Again, not all elk know when they're supposed to ovulate. Just like humans, there are many outliers, but most elk in Colorado are going to follow this pattern in September when we're chasing them and interested in what they're up to.